Hello, friends. I wanted to touch base again. As you should know by now, I sent around a message last night that I've now posted our midterm paper prompts. They are posted now under the assignments tab. Um, and you'll notice that there are four paper prompts that you can choose from. Each one highlights a certain theme, mainly themes that we've been uncovering during our discussion forums. And I've given you a couple of options on text that you may want to put together in response to those themes, but you can really choose whatever texts you are most interested in and you think would yield the most interesting comparative analysis. I just kind of pulled in a couple of texts that I thought, spoke to that particular theme pretty well, but you really have some flexibility and some freedom there to choose what you are interested in. One of the stipulations for the midterm is that you deal with two texts and no more than three texts that we've read thus far. This paper is 3 to 5 pages. That's not that much space to do a real in-depth critical analysis, comparative analysis. So I don't want you to take on too many texts, because what will happen is you'll end up just writing a summary of each of those texts and you won't actually do some critical unpacking in terms of the ways that those texts are sort of talking to each other in relation to whatever prompt you choose. I do ask that you choose texts that we've read during different discussion forums to ensure that you're reading pieces that were written by, different authors during different time periods, different cultural backgrounds. Since this is a comparative literature class, one of our main goals is to really put texts that have disparate cultural influences, temporal influences, political influences, to sort of put them in conversation with one another and see how they resonate. One exception to this is if you wanted to look at the fairy tales, you could do, a close critical examination of, say, Carter's fairy tales with one of the Grimm's brothers, or you could also do Perrault. It's up to you. That's an exception, since they are, written during different times and obviously by different authors and who have different cultural influences. That would work. But otherwise, you should be choosing texts that we've read during different discussion forums. Okay, I've posted under the email that I sent out 3 critical resources to help you with this paper. So there's a paper writing 101 document that goes through, the purpose and function of an introduction, how to structure body paragraphs, the types of quotes to look for to sort of ground your analysis, and as well as like the function of a conclusion, which to me is always the echo of your intro, right? You sort of echo the ideas and the argument that you set forth in your introduction. There's also a little like thesis worksheet where I point to 2 different types of thesis statements, one of which is more of an observational thesis statement, which you want to avoid. It's really common for people just to write a sort of argument that's more an observation rather than an original argument. And the telltale sign to know if you have a sort of original analytical argument at stake is if your argument can be argued a different way. Not necessarily even in complete opposition to, but someone could say, well, that's interesting, but I don't see it that way. I would argue that blah, 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 blah. If you feel like there is something at stake, that someone could take an alternate position, then you are more in sort of analytical territory, and that is what you want. So I have a worksheet that sort of distinguishes between the two that you should definitely review. And then I have a specific paper guidelines, which really goes over everything that you need to know for composing your formal papers. This goes for your midterm. It also goes for your final paper when you get to that at the end of the semester. I'm just going to highlight a couple of the paper guidelines. So again, you want to do a close textual analysis of 2, no more than 3 different pieces. You should have a very clear analytical argument at stake that answers the prompt clearly, your thesis statement, I always say, is kind of like a roadmap for the rest of your paper. So you want to be specific. You want to answer the prompt and tell the reader exactly how you intend to lay out your argument in the paper. This will also help you stay organized. So if you ever feel like you're like typing along and you're like, why am I writing this again? You can go back to your thesis statement and remind yourself of the main point that you were trying to make in that body paragraph that reflects back on your, main argument. And it also helps the reader to know exactly how you intend to lay out that argument so that, I can follow along more easily. You want to make sure that your body paragraph, the way that I would structure your body paragraphs is I would make sure that you are dealing with both of the text or all three of the texts in the same body paragraph. This way you kind of force yourself to really do that kind of close textual analysis that you're supposed to be doing in this type of an essay. I've read essays before where, a person's just written about the first text and then, the second text, and then there's maybe one paragraph at the end that tries to connect them. That structure tends to be less productive and less successful because you don't really actually do the type of like direct analysis that you should be doing throughout the course of your paper. So aim to have both texts or all three texts in the same body paragraph as you go along. You want to choose quotes wisely. You need quotes from each of the stories that you're reading to help ground your analysis. Choose quotes that really work for you. If you need to set them up with a brief context, you can. That should be like a line or two. Choose quotes that really do support the main point that you're trying to make. And don't just drop in a quote and sort of move on. It's your job as the writer to make those critical connections between the quote and how it ties back to your main argument, and also how it may tie to the second text that you're dealing with in your essay. Okay, so make sure you are making those critical connections and you're choosing quotes that really work to support your argument. When you look at a quote that you're using to support a point or demonstrate a point, ask yourself, is this the best quote that I could be using? Is it doing a lot of work for me in really showcasing my idea? If yes, great. If no, I would go back through the story and see what else you can come up with. You obviously need an identifiable introduction. Your introduction should include the full names, full titles of the authors and their respective stories. You should also provide just a brief sort of context for, where these authors sort of come from so that you can situate them a little bit in terms of their historical and cultural background, seeing as you do have to take those elements in mind when you're composing your analysis. Please proofread your papers, friends. Proofread. It doesn't take that long, and it can make such a big difference in terms of your writing being polished and being clear. Remember, your writing is a representation of you as a student, as an author, so you want to submit your best work, okay? The way that I always recommend people edit their papers is actually to print them out and read them out loud. You're going to sound a little cray-cray, okay? But read it to your dog, read it to the mirror, read it to your mom, read it to your roommate, whoever will listen. Why? Because you hear errors, you hear those sort of cosmetic mistakes, those grammatical issues. You hear them much more easily when you read something out loud. When you slow down and you pay attention to what's actually on the page, you will hear those errors much more readily than when you're reading your work on a screen. Our brains are very smart. They autocorrect for us. So do yourselves a favor, before you upload, make sure that you do a good thorough proofreading of your work. Nothing fancy. We're doing 12-point Times New Roman font. You should have a basic MLA heading on your paper and a title. You should have, paginated pages. Follow the MLA guide for citations. You'll also need a separate works cited page. That does not count towards your 3 to 5 pages. Okay, so a separate works cited page. for each story that you're citing in your work. Okay? Your paper should avoid summarizing the text. Remember, I've read these texts too, so there's no need to provide a summary. You can provide brief context of the stories. That should be like a line or two. The rest should be your own interpretation, analysis, how you are linking the text that you're talking about. Okay, so don't give me a paper that just tells me the story of Carter's, Little Red Riding Hood, because guess what? I already read it. Okay, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in how you are interpreting that text and how you are interpreting it in relation to another text of your choosing, and how that reflects on whatever prompt you've chosen. And try not to be redundant. Introduce and focus on one specific idea per body paragraph, so that you avoid repetition. Sometimes we get really excited because we make a good point and then we run out of steam and we end up just reiterating that point. So make sure in each body paragraph you really are introducing a new idea. Okay. I think that's it. Review the paper guidelines so that you're clear on what is expected of you. And if you have lingering questions, feel free to reach out ahead of time and email me. You'll notice that I've referenced some stories we haven't read yet in my prompts. That's fine. We will have read them by the time you'll be writing these papers. Remember too that the week of the week of the 21st, the 15th to the 21st, we're reading through that week, and then the following week we're not reading any new texts. Instead of our discussion forums, that is going to be a writing, revising week for you. And I've given you the option, if you want, to send me an introduction with a thesis statement, not a whole paper, but your intro thesis statement you can send me by the 24th, which is a Wednesday, and I will give you some basic feedback on that. Yeah, you seem to be on the right track. This seems more observational in terms of a thesis. You're not considering maybe you want to rework that. I'll give you some feedback before you write the whole paper. And then your final midterm papers are due on Sunday, October 28th by 5 p.m. You'll upload your paper onto the labeled assignments link. It's linked midterm paper. You'll upload your work, preferably as a Word document. Because we have to use Turnitin, you'll only be allowed to upload your work once. So make sure that you're uploading the final draft. Because we have to use Turnitin, there's only one option, and it's a single file upload, and we can't override the system. So make sure you're uploading your polished, perfect, brilliant piece of writing for your midterm papers. And again, if you have any questions ahead of time, you do have some time before you really need to start working on this. But I like to give you the prompts early so that you have these general themes in mind as we continue our discussion forums, so that you can continue to develop your ideas in these more informal modes of writing via our discussion forums. Like, this is sort of fertile ground to really start to, get the wheels turning and think through, how some of these themes are impacting the texts that we're reading. A lot of times that early writing, that informal writing, will help to spark your ideas on how you want to structure your midterm paper, and definitely what works you want to put in conversation with one another. Okay. Last announcement is we're going to do our second short writing assignment next Sunday, okay, which I believe is the 14th, okay, so October 14th, next Sunday, a week from today, 5 p.m. It's going to be on Joyce Carol Oates and Flannery O'Connor. I'll probably have 2 prompts, and you can choose one of them, one on one story, one on the other. And you can choose one and write, your response from there. This will also be good. It'll give you another opportunity to sort of structure ideas. Again, practice working on formulating your ideas and formalizing your ideas before you then move on to the official first formal paper of the midterm. Okay, I'm going to send out an announcement about the short writing assignment as well, so you have it clearly in writing as a reminder as well. Okay, I think that's all from me right now. We have our discussion forum closing this evening, okay, on Chopin. So if you haven't posted yet, please do so. And onward we go. Here we are in October. What? We're in October, guys, and it's 80 degrees. Why? Just why? I don't know. I just want some cider, a little light sweater. I don't need to be cold. Just want it to be like comfortable. I want fall. Anyway. Okay, any questions? Be in touch as always. Okay, talk soon. Bye.